The president of Media Matters for America, MediaMatters.org, drops by to describe what Fox News and the Trumpkins are doing. Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Here with you on the line with us is Angelo Carusone. He is the president of Media Matters for America, MediaMatters.org, a website we refer to often on this program. His Twitter handle is GoAngelo. Angelo, welcome back to the program. I'm curious. I was going through this piece, Krebs on Security, this morning, published a rather lengthy piece that's a good bookend to Judd Legum's piece over at popular.info. On Krebs on Security, he discovered 150 roughly domains that have been registered in the last few weeks, many of them within the same few hours. Reopen PA, reopen MI, reopen WA, reopen MN, all these reopen sites. And some of them track back to FreedomWorks, some of them track back to so-called gun rights groups, which are probably fronts for gun manufacturers. And a whole bunch of them track back to these three brothers who are, who are making apparently a lot of money off outrage. What role is the media playing in this, particularly Fox so-called news?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to start, too, because, part of what happens here is that, you have a place like Fox that actually is able to build the sort of demand or identify sort of a problem that these kind of grifters come in and sort of coalesce and organize around. And then there are other people that are not even necessarily grifters, right, but that they are just extremists. So in addition to these far-right, gun groups and some of these operatives, there's also some state representatives that are being opportunistic, people on the Women for Trump advisory board. A lot of anti-vaxxers are sort of standing up these events and pages. But where it all really started was, most of this stuff, and you sort of alluded to it in the beginning of your intro, where you sort of identified that a lot of these things kind of happened at one big shot. They all sort of came around at once. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that most of this stuff started on April 10th. But if you look at what was happening on Fox News, and in particular on Fox News, and then some of the other right-wing echo chamber, one thing that was taking place is on the 7th and the 8th is when they started to make this case that it's time to end the national lockdowns. And there was an important distinction. They switched a little bit from just talking about the economic harms to now making it an issue of freedom and liberty. And one of the things that was most striking is that typically it's not the case, but this clip from Tucker Carlson, his sort of appeal to end the lockdowns, was one of the most trafficked sources, videos in the right-wing echo chamber on the 9th. And all of a sudden, because it saturates the landscape with that demand, these groups sort of pop up and try to coalesce and try to capture some of that, because they know that once they do that, they'll in turn be rewarded with promotion from the very same source that identified and articulated the need in the first place.
Which raises perhaps a larger question. Kevin Rudd, the former Prime Minister of Australia, last year, as I recall, wrote a piece for the Sydney Morning Herald titled "Rupert Murdoch is the cancer at the heart of Australian democracy." And then he goes through and chronicles not only how Murdoch has corrupted Australian politics for some 20, 30 years, but how he then moved to the UK and he corrupted UK politics, British politics, and then he moved to the United States and now he's been corrupting American politics. Gotten fabulously rich in the process, although he started out, doing well with the newspaper. I believe he inherited it from his dad. But he built this empire. His son Lachlan is largely running most of it, I guess now, Fox News and whatnot. What's in it for these guys? And is there an effort to call them out or publicly shame them the way Kevin Rudd tried to do in Australia? Or is there any? I mean, what is their agenda? I'm baffled.
Yeah, in this case, Fox has made a pretty clear, their agenda is to be completely aligned with Trump at this point. And whether or not that's what the position that the super higher-ups necessarily want, it doesn't really matter. I don't even know if they could change right now if they wanted to, although I don't think they do, because in a way, Trump did something that no one else was really able to do in Fox's history and much of Murdoch's history, is that he captured the Fox audience. And in a way, there are two sort of assignment editors at Fox News, right? You have Trump, and then you have the day-to-day people there. And, he could cannibalize that audience pretty quickly if he wanted to, or at least disrupt it. And that's where Fox's power comes from, because ultimately, that's the answer to your question. What they want is power. And I know that, and here's the proof that they want power more than anything else, including money. They love money, don't get me wrong, and they make plenty of it. But it's all about power, political power and personal self-interest. And the reason I know that, and the proof is in the pudding, is that they actually lose money. Fox News lost $300 million in advertising revenue over the past 2 years. $300 million. Simply because some of their hosts are so extreme that they can no longer sell ads. They had to cut their ad inventory during prime time. Their most highly rated shows, they literally had to halve their ad inventory. Now, if they were really interested in money, they would have brought on board other conservatives, but just a little more palatable, right? Or maybe forced some of their personalities to reel it in. But it's not just about the money. If it was purely about maximizing profit, they would take other steps to mitigate those losses, but they don't. And the reason they don't is because they get something more out of it. That's it.
Which is power. In our third hour, Professor Justin Frank is going to be with us, a psychiatrist who wrote Trump on the Couch. And I've had this conversation with him in the past where, somebody will say, well, they just want power. And I'll ask him, the psychiatrist, why does somebody want power? And my recollection of the last time we talked was that basically there were two possible answers to that. Number one is to use that power in a practical way. That is, for example, to get myself tax breaks or to promote the interests of my business. And the other answer is people crave power out of a deep sense of insecurity, a neurotic sense of insecurity. And if they can acquire power over others, it gives them a sense of being in control of the world when, in many cases, they grew up feeling like the world was out of control. A, can you think of any other reasons why somebody might want power? And B, if the Murdochs and the Kochs and the FreedomWorks folks and all these guys, if what they're interested in is in power, why?
Yeah, that's the part. Some of it is that, and I think this is the piece that underlies a lot of it, is that in their case, they need the kind of power that they're generating because their worldview, to the extent that there is one, and their political philosophy, especially in the case of the Murdochs, is fundamentally anti-democratic. And so in order right, that's right. And so in order to drive that, right, you need power. Right? How do you force some of the things that they've done in terms of, not putting in place changes into basic climate change protection? They literally were forcing on-air talent to lie about the climate record. You can go down the list. A lot of what they push for is fundamentally anti-democratic. And to drive that part of the agenda, is you need that power. And then the other part is, and I think this is really clear, less in Rupert, but more in Lachlan, is that, when I look at Rupert Murdoch, there's this piece of it, which is he wants a legacy and an institution to live beyond him, right? He wants to build this thing almost like a monument, like a modern-day pyramid, right? He's always had this idea that his papers, that's why his papers are still his most beloved. Of all the things he has, he's very fixated on his papers and his FCC licenses. There's a reason he moved his office into into Roger Ailes' old office to sit at Fox News, because he gets the idea that the news side of it is much more influential, it's lasting. But Lachlan, on the other hand, is a nihilist. He doesn't care about the company. He really just wants power for power's sake. It's sort of a self-indulgence, do whatever you want, doesn't matter. There's a short-term satisfaction that comes from that, and it happens to align with a worldview, which is, that most of this stuff is a hoax, and if it doesn't, who cares? If I can prove it, then it's true. If I can convince people, then it's true. And that's where I think we run into an issue with Fox more broadly is, part of what's in it for them is, obviously they make money from it, right? They make an enormous amount of money from it, but they also get power. And then some of these secondary people, the people that feed off them, they're like the wealth defense industry, right? They get a little taste.
Right. Yeah, I get that. We just have about a minute before we're going to hit a hard break here, too, Angelo. If their pursuit is for power, how do you interrupt that? What kind of intervention can we do as a country?
Yeah, we have one thing here that is help that is enabling them. Fox News is the second most expensive channel on everybody's cable box after ESPN. Do you know that if Fox News did not have a single dollar in advertising revenue, they would still have a 90% profit margin? No other commercial company is even close to that, and that's because every cable customer is forced to pay them $2 or more a month for their for the service, even if they never turned it on. It's these subscriber fees, and Fox has leveraged all that power and their rabid audience to artificially inflate what cable companies are forced to pay them, which are costs that they pass off to the customers. So the single biggest thing here is if Fox has a cushion, right, because they can lose advertising money, but at the end of the day, they were still an enormously profitable company because of that. No other media outlet has that advantage. So the single most effective thing that people can do right now, at least with respect to Fox, is to continue to expose them, right? But there's this other piece that we all have some power here, a small piece of it, which is we each have a say over our cable companies. And Fox has organized their people every time they renegotiate with their cable providers. That's why they're able to jack up those rates. By contrast,
So I should tell my cable company I don't want Fox anymore?
That's right. And even if they don't get rid of Fox, you know what they do? They will start to negotiate those rates